Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren, this is Reads with Lauren, and thank you so much for being here with me today. Now this is part 3 of a 3-part series. I made the decision to go back 10 years and look at all of the series that I've started and decide if they were series that I have every intention of finishing, or if they are series that I would rather not finish. So today I'm going to have a bit of a chat with you about some of the series that I have started and that I have no intention of finishing. The first 2 videos, so the first one was a video talking about all of the ones that I have every intention of finishing, and then part 2 was book series that I've started that I may finish, but they're not a high priority. But today I am ready to get vicious. I say that, but there's no way that I can be mean about a book, because honestly, if it hasn't worked for me, it's purely just because I am not the right audience. And every book has its good qualities and every book has its bad qualities, and everyone's going to like different things. So I'm not going to be nasty per se unless I think the book was absolute trash. But even so, I have no intention of making anybody feel bad, because it's a dream of mine or a goal of mine to write a book one day, and I know that it would absolutely just break my heart and make me lose all hope as a writer if I had a negative review that was purely telling me that my book was absolute trollop. So this is going to be kind as possible. I will be talking about the good parts of these books and why they may work for you, but these are just book series that I do not have any desire to finish personally, just basically because some of them are series that just don't, in a genre that don't really work for me anymore. Or, you know, they're arcs that I have read and reviewed but have no intention of continuing because they're just not something that really works for me. But let's make a start, because I do have 10 years worth, and all up it was 67 books, which is why I've broken this up into 3 parts. But this is the longest list of the 3, so this could take a while. So get yourself a drink and get relaxed, and let's go through them together. So back in 2014, I decided to start the Weather Warden series by Rachel Caine. This is a young adult urban fantasy series. I read book 1 and book 1.5, and this series centers on Joanne, who is a warden, and wardens are the people protecting humanity from Mother Nature. So in this world, Mother Nature is quite violent, and these people use their magical powers to help keep things standard. So, you know, let's not talk about how relatable that is now and how great that would be, you know, with climate change and everything. But anyway, Joanne is actually on the run, so she isn't able to use her powers for good. She is on the run, and I cannot remember why, but I just remember I did enjoy the first book, and I'm sure that I have the rest of them on my Kindle if I go searching all the way back through the 800 books I have, but I just have no intention of finishing this. Urban fantasy was kind of my big thing when I was a teenager, and I've kind of moved away from it. I still like to delve into it from time to time, and going through my TBR jars, trying to get through all of the books that I have to read means that I am picking up quite a few of them, but it does mean that a lot of them are ending up on this list. But in saying that, you know, Cassandra Clare was one of my favorite authors as a teenager, and growing up I have reread them, and I found that sort of like from here onwards, the Clockwork series, so good. But yeah, I definitely don't love these ones as much as I used to, but they're still a series that I thoroughly enjoy. So it is really a case of book by book basis, but generally overall, I don't have a lot of urban fantasy series that I do plan on continuing. So continuing on with that sort of theme, I also have the Morganville Vampires series by the same author, Rachel Caine. So this is about Claire, who is a college freshman. She decides to leave her toxic dorm situation, and she moves out of the college dorms into this old house with roommates who just don't show many signs of life. So it is a vampire story, and I read the first one. There are 15 main novels, but there are 51 51 stories all up, including the short stories. And that's just an investment I'm not willing to make on a series that I'm not 100% invested in. I barely even remember this one, to be honest with you. It was 9 years ago, so that does make sense. But yeah, I just don't have the intention of revisiting this unless it comes up in like my TBR jar, or one day I manage to get through my huge pile of books that I'm desperate to read and, decide to give these potentially another shot. But at this point, no plans. This one could be a controversial opinion because I decided to try the first book in the 50 Shades series by E.L. James. And I really didn't understand the hype for these books. I know that they were a fan fiction based on Twilight, and Twilight is very toxic, and it was a series I loved as a teenager and just do not enjoy anymore because of the relationship. I don't appreciate relationship dynamics like that anymore. I have suffered enough of that drama and toxicity in my real life, and I just want to have healthy relationships in my space now. But in saying that, I gave 50 Shades a go. I really did not enjoy the first book, and I had no desire back then to continue, nor do I have any desire to continue now. I also watched, I think I have seen the first 2 movies, but not by choice. I understand that this really helped bring erotica into like mainstream media, and it kind of really brought BDSM into people's lives that are were quite closed off from that sort of avenue, which is great. And I'm glad that it came out and so many people loved it so much. It kind of gives me the same sort of vibes as Sarah J Maas though. Like, I just don't understand the hype. However, I do plan on attempting Sarah J Maas one day, potentially as a reading vlog, because I just want to see what the hype's all about. And I do like a little bit of, smutty books. Give me romance with some spice and I'm all for it. But yes, I found that this first book wasn't that great, and I just don't want to promote, and I don't appreciate the storyline being that this toxic man does change his ways for her, because it definitely promotes that he will change for me. And it's something that, very rarely, if at all, will actually happen in reality. And I think it's quite damaging to promote that kind of relationship. Personally, purely based on my own experiences. But yes, I think that there is a lot better out there. If you're looking for something smutty, something in the BDSM field, there is so much spicy books out there that are so much better than these ones. So I would not recommend reading them personally. If you haven't read them yet but you do want to venture down that path, there are definitely other books that I would recommend over this series. But I understand and I appreciate why so many people love it. Then I was dating someone who was obsessed with Peter F. Hamilton at the time, so I attempted book 1 of the Night's Dawn series. So this is a pretty epic sci-fi, and I don't mind a little bit of sci-fi now, but I still struggle with the ones that are very scientific and have a lot of mathematical equations and science that I just can't wrap my head around. So the fact that I read this in 2015 when I wasn't reading any sci-fi, I think that that's a pretty big achievement, because it was over 1,000 pages. It definitely took me a long time. I think I ended up reading it over a 6-month period just because I struggled so much digesting the information. But yeah, I read the first book, which is The Reality Dysfunction, and I think it might have just been the timing. I'm not sure if it's a series that I could go back to and appreciate more now, but I found the main character was really misogynistic. I really struggled with the way that he treated other people, and it's definitely not high on my priority list. I don't want to read a book that takes me 6 months. And in saying that, like I said, nowadays, because I read more of that genre, potentially it might not take as long, but it's just not on my radar at the moment. So that series is based in 2600, and the galaxy is colonized with genetic engineering, which is defeating disease and removing the need for actual, natural pregnancy. So people are having children separate from their bodies, and they have the ability to live off Earth. So it's a great concept, and it's, if there are other books like this out there, I'd love to read them. But basically the main character is this sort of renegade criminal, and he ends up having this run-in with an alien entity, which ends up like causing a whole heap of problems and, bring about people's worst fears. So, I mean, yeah, the premise sounds great. I just remember really, really struggling with it, and I don't think that I'll continue with this series. However, if there are any sci-fi books out there with the same sort of concept and more likable characters, let me know, because I don't necessarily need the characters to be likable, but I don't want them to be unlikable in a way that drives me mental. Then in 2017, I decided to read the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. So I have watched probably 4.5 seasons of the TV show, and it's a great TV show. However, I only got through 2 of the Outlander books, and I really struggled to get through them. They took me quite a while. I just think that the length, I feel like the length and the detail was quite a lot, and I feel like they could have been shortened a little bit. But in saying that, I think that the fact that I watched the shows before I read the books, it was like digesting the same information in a more drawn out way. So I probably would have been better off reading the books first. But I do love the story. If you don't know what it is about a woman who is from the 1940s. She's just come back from being a nurse in the war, and she goes on this trip with her husband to Scotland, ends up walking through the Standing Stones in an ancient circle, and they send her 200 years in the past, and she has to, connect with this group of renegade Scottish men, and it's wonderful. It is wonderful. And I love the show. And the only reason I haven't finished season 5 is because I just found it starting to be a little bit drawn out. Not as much was occurring. But I love the story. And I think that if they were shorter books, I would continue with the series. However, in saying that, I did pick up a couple of years ago, I think before I even read or knew of the Outlander series, I picked up one of the Lord John books. So I've got Lord John and the Hand of Devils. These books are a little bit shorter, and I do like the character Lord John. So it's possible. I've kept this on my shelf because I do think that this could be a series I could enjoy. And I would love to learn a little bit more about Lord John, because he is a great character in the series and he doesn't get a whole lot of spotlight. So that is potentially one that I will look into. I don't think this is book 1, but I will definitely, one day I do plan on reading these ones, but I don't think that I will continue with the Outlander series. I think that if I do, it will just be the TV series. Then moving on to 2021. So bit of a jump, but that's great because that means that there was a lot of series that I read that I either finished or I am planning on continuing. So that's really exciting. But in 2021, I picked up Broken Skies series by Theresa Kay. So I read the first book in this series. It is a YA dystopian sci-fi romance where Jax is the main character, and it is it's post-apocalyptic, and Jax's brother is kidnapped by the aliens that have settled the Earth. However, when they came down in their ship and took Jax's brother, they left one of their aliens behind. And the alien ends up getting together with Jax to find Jax's brother. And I listened to it in audio. The story was really great. I did enjoy it, but I'm not as into YA as I used to be, which is why this is probably a series that I won't continue. It was a good, quick read that I listened to while I was doing jobs around the house, and I did enjoy it. But yeah, it's just not one that I have any intention of continuing. But the first book on its own is pretty good if you like a YA romance. The next book series that I started was the Graceling series by Kristen Kashaw. I picked this one up and I did enjoy this one. It's about Katza, who is a Graceling with the power to kill, and she is unfortunately forced to work as the king's thug. So there are 5 books in the series. However, the books do not continue on Katz's story. So they sort of branch off onto side characters and they get a book each. I enjoyed this book. However, same sort of deal. It's YA. It's not something that I was pumped enough about. I didn't really care enough about the side characters to learn about their stories. I have heard great things, so I might change my mind in the future, but at this point, it's not one that I plan on continuing, and I decided to keep the book on the off chance that one of my kids might end up wanting to read it one day. But yeah, I don't plan on continuing this series at any point soon. Then I started the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I hope that I said that correctly. I'm so sorry. I'm referencing my notes because I would have not had any idea. I've read the first book and there are 5 in the series. And look, it is translated from Japanese, and I do find that works that have been translated from Japanese can be quite dry, and I don't thoroughly enjoy them as much as I would like to. I've tried many times because there are so many stories that I think will be so good and that I would really enjoy, but I just found, particularly this one, it was quite dry and I really struggled with it. However, the premise is really cool. It is based in this coffee shop where you can go into this coffee shop and travel back in time. However, the rules are that you cannot move from the table that you're sitting at. You can only go into the past in the coffee shop to have conversations with people you've been there with previously. And you are only back in time for as long as your coffee stays warm. So once the coffee gets cold, you end up coming back to the present. Great idea in theory, and some of the stories are really great, but I did not like the way that it ended, and I have heard that the rest of the series is not nearly as good. So considering it wasn't a book that I loved, I don't plan on reading anymore. However, I thought that the premise was really cool, and I think that a lot of people would really love it. I know that a lot of people have it as one of their favorite books, and I totally understand why. It just didn't have the same ring for me, and yeah, I just don't have any desire to continue it. But that could just potentially be because I just don't have the ability to appreciate the Japanese translated books. I am going to continue. I am desperate to try and find some books that I love because I love reading books from all over the world. So I'm going to continue on that journey, but just not with this series. Then after that, I decided to venture into Colleen Hoover and I read It Ends With Us. This one has so many controversial opinions and so much, that you could talk about. But my consensus about this story was it was very easy to read. I read it quite quickly. It drew me in. I was hooked. However, problematic AF. There is so much in this book that, makes the fact that it is written as a romance really problematic. It is a very good depiction of domestic violence, and I found that even though hard to read, having experienced similar things myself, I thought that it was a very good depiction of that sort of relationship. However, I didn't like the way that it ended. I didn't like the way that the situation was handled. So I really understand the hate, and I don't think that it should be classed as a romance. However, I did enjoy the reading process, but not enough for me to continue reading the second book, which is It Starts With Us. So this book centers on Lily Rose, who is a florist, because that's so creative. She ends up getting together with Ryle, and Ryle is just gross from the start. I don't really understand the appeal. Looking back, I don't really understand the appeal of the people in my life who did similar things. So I guess from this sort of perspective, that makes sense. But there's also a third character, which is Atlas, and he is Lily's first love. And I know that the second book ventures more into Atlas's story, but it's just not enough for me to continue. I mean, if it was put in my lap and someone said to me, you should read this, I know it would be an enjoyable read because I do enjoy Colleen Hoover's work, but I also know that it is quite problematic, and it's definitely not something that I want to go out of my way to read. Speaking of problematic, This book made me so violently angry. So I read book 1 in the Bridgerton series. I've heard so many amazing reviews about the show, and I do intend on watching it one day. However, I read the first book, The Duke and I think it's called. In my notes, I've just written nope, nope, nope. So I haven't really given myself anything to work with. But yeah, I hated the first book. It is a historical romance, but the books are very whitewashed. It is very misogynistic. It is not fun. It is not good. There is too much conversations that is quite boring. But yes, I've heard that the Bridgerton series is great. And there is a very, 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 very problematic scene that I have heard is not quite the same in the TV show, I would hope, because there is no way that that should be promoted as okay. I won't give too much away in case you do decide to read them, but all I can say is I have no intention of continuing this series, and I would eventually like to watch the TV series, but it's also not high on my radar, just because I really did not enjoy the experience listening. Because I did listen to it in audio, but I didn't appreciate it. So in 2022, I also picked up the first book in a series called the Eternal Vigilance series, and this is by Gabrielle Faust. They have been around for quite a while. They came out around the time of the urban fantasies where they were really popular, and the vampires and all of that. And look, I appreciated the book. I enjoyed listening to it. I listened to it on audio, and the only reason I picked it up is because I was quite obsessed with the TikToker at the time who ended up narrating the audio. In saying that, I enjoyed the experience. I would listen to anything that man narrated at any point of time. But I have no intention of continuing the series because I wasn't hooked for the storyline, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, it was great. It was good, and it gave me more Interview with a Vampire vibes than Twilight vibes, which is always a great thing to say, in my opinion, because you want your vampires to be kick-ass, like in Interview with the Vampire series by Anne Rice. But yeah, definitely not one that I will continue, but it is about this vampire named Tynan who slept for a century, and when he wakes up in this world obliterated by this brutal war. So it's a great concept, and if you love that sort of thing, I do recommend it. I think it's really great if that's the sort of genre that you're into. Then I ventured into the Molly Southbourne series by Tade Thompson. I read The Murders of Molly Southbourne, which is a great idea in theory. I didn't mind the execution, but I was hoping for something a little bit more or a little bit different. I enjoyed the book, but I don't think I enjoyed it enough to read the rest of the series. But basically it's about Molly, who every time she bleeds creates a clone of herself who is set out to destroy her. So you can imagine that would be quite difficult to live with. And yeah, the book was great and the concept is really good, but yeah, I don't really have any intention of continuing with the other 2 books. Then I reattempted another middle grade, and I don't enjoy middle grades as much as I would like to, and I think that I've kept them purely for the case that I have children and hopefully one day they might want to read them. So this could end up being a book series that I end up getting into later on, or I will read with my kids, but it's Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. At this point, it's just not something that I have any intention of continuing. It wasn't too bad. I did enjoy the read, but yeah, it just didn't hook me in. 3 currently in the series, with a 4th one coming out later this year. But this is about a cursed girl who escapes death and ends up going to school at Nevermore, which is this school for magicians. And basically she goes through these competitions in order to become a member of the Wondrous Society, which is, you know, the society to be in this town. Yeah, it's okay. I enjoyed it, but it's a middle grade and that just doesn't quite do it for me anymore. But I do hope that one of my kids will end up enjoying this series because it is a lot of fun. So if you have a child that's really into magical schools and all of that, I do recommend this series. It is lots of fun. I picked up an ARC, and the ARC was the first book in the Mercy Ames series by H.M. Mills. This book was one that I read as an arc, and look, it was okay. I liked the storyline, but it's another urban fantasy, and I do think that there could be a lot of work done on it to make it a more fleshed out story. But then again, it is YA, it's urban fantasy, it definitely fits that criteria. And I think it was just not for me. But it is about Mercy, and Mercy is the child of a demon and an angel. 5 years after her parents disappear, she is thrown into this Lincoln boarding school by the request of her parents. And, you know, there is a connection with one of the gargoyles, who is also an angel to protect her and watch over her. And there is like a demon who is trying to seduce her and bring her to the dark side. And like, it's a great idea and concept. It just didn't quite hit the mark for me. There is another one that I won't be continuing on reading, but you know, if that's sort of your thing, or if you have a teenager who is looking into urban fantasy, this is a relatively new release that I think would be potentially something they might enjoy. But yeah, it just wasn't for me. Then we get around the period before I started YouTube, but I started to give myself challenges. So I have two TBR jars, one for my Kindle and one for my books behind me. And I gave myself the challenge to read several books from my TBR jars to decide whether I was going to continue with the series or DNF these books and get rid of them, but basically just a way to get through my TBR. So I started with the Sentinels of the Galaxy series by Maria V. Snyder. This was a YA sci-fi romance. I listened to it in audio and I did enjoy it. I think that it's probably a book that was just right for the timing. It's not something that I think that I would enjoy continuing, but I had a good time listening to it. It is about Lyra, whose parents are archaeologists, but they drag her to different planets to investigate these terracotta warriors that have been found on these planets. Obviously, being a teenager and the time dilation, she has a big issue with this. There's not a lot of social context on these trips. However, this particular trip, she meets this boy who is also on this trip with his parents, and a love ensues. And yeah, it wasn't too bad, but I definitely wouldn't continue it unless, like I said, it was thrown at me and someone said, hey, read this. And I started the first book in a book series of 9, which is The Blackmore Sisters by Leanne Dobbs. This is a series about witches who are stuck in this murder mystery. It was okay. I enjoyed it. It's not something that I would continue though. But yeah, it is a fun time. If you like a murder mystery and you like a little bit of witches, I would recommend it, but yeah, just not for me. Then I read the first book in the Legends of Dimming Wood series by C. Greenwood, which was Magic of Thieves. This was an audio. It was okay. I don't know that it's one I would continue. I don't even really remember what it was about. She was one of the last elves, and she ended up growing up with this group of renegades, and it was okay. I don't remember it, and I don't really have any intention of continuing, but it was all right to listen to. And I read the first 2 books in the McKetty Vanderwall series by Tara Moss. So this is like a mystery crime thriller book series. Tara Moss is a model, so this book is McKetty is also a model, so it kind of just feels like, I don't know, I guess write what you know, but it just didn't quite work for me. I did give it a go because I had the first 3 books. I really wanted to try and finish it, but after the second book, I just made the decision not to. It's not bad for a mystery thriller, but it's kind of just like all of the other mass paperbacks in that genre. And then I read the first book in the Emaneska series by Ben Galley. So this fantasy series is compared to Game of Thrones and Die Hard. I didn't really get those vibes, but it was okay. Like same as the other ones. I don't really remember much about it. I have no inclination to continue. There's 5 more. I think it was just a freebie off Audible. It was okay. I don't really remember much about it, and I don't really intend on finishing it. So Not for me. Then another read or unhaul challenge that I gave myself before YouTube, I picked up the Breeders series by Katie French. This is on the Kindle. It's a dystopian YA series about Riley, and Riley is one of the last free girls that have escaped the Breeders, and the Breeders are these people who are testing women who can breed in order to, you know, be able to continue on the species, but they're doing quite damaging bad testing on these women. So her mother is abducted, and between her brother and this gunslinger named Clay that she runs into along the way, who is determined to help, obviously they grow closer in this process of trying to find their mother. It was brutal. It was quite gory. The testings that they're doing is quite scary. I did enjoy it, but I don't have the intention of finishing it, purely because, yeah, it's sort of just another YA dystopian that, you know, would have been definitely my thing, and I would have continued on probably as a teenager, but I just don't really have the inclination to continue this particular series. Then I also picked up, from the same sort of challenge, the Bloodstone Saga by Courtney Cole. I read Every Last Kiss, which is book 1. The premise was really, really cool. I was really into this idea. Basically, Macy has regenerated, you know, as this young teenager. She is given back this necklace that feels familiar to her, but she'd never seen it before, that she's aware of. She puts it on. She goes back in time to a past regeneration. She's basically Cleopatra's first-hand, like, servant maid, and, you know, to try and change the story, because obviously if you know anything about Cleopatra, you know how the story ends. But Macy's partner from that regeneration, you know, obviously she wants to try and save him. And look, the premise is okay, but it's a YA with a lot of people just getting laid, despite all of the drama occurring around them. So that kind of threw me out of the story. I mean, I know that it was more of a romance than, you know, a historical fiction, but I wanted more of the historical because I'm obsessed with Cleopatra and ancient Egypt. I love all of that stuff. So I think that if it was an adult book with more of the historical fiction in it, I would have enjoyed it more. But the premise was really cool, and yeah, it's just not something that I personally will continue. I was really on the, like, read or unhaul train for a while, so I also picked up the first book in the Waters Keepers series by Christy Anderson. So this was a YA paranormal romance about Sadie, who meets this strange boy who seems to be following her around, and he actually seems quite familiar. As they grow closer, she discovers this world of secret agents that she never knew existed. However, she has the same birthmark that these people have. It was okay. Yet again, it was another premise that would have been really cool, but it was YA romance, so that was the main focus of it. And as nice as the romance was, they were quite sweet. Yeah, it's not one that I have any intention of continuing, but I'm glad that I read it. It was a fun time. Then I read the first book in the Cat du Bois Chronicles by Lindsay Sparks. I wasn't aware that Lindsay Sparks actually had another series, and this was a spin-off of that series. But this is an urban fantasy spin-off about Cat, who is an immortal witch living as a tattoo artist and a fortune teller. After putting down her sword, she used to kill other immortals, and yeah, she has stepped away from that, but obviously in comes a blast from the past to tell her that her brother is missing. It was okay. Yet again, it was an alright read, not something that I plan on continuing, but I did have a good time with it, and I believe there are a couple that I get mixed up, and but I believe that this one had no spice, and it was all like tension vibes, and that potentially the spice will come in later books, so that could be something that draws you in. Then I picked up the Halloween Laveau series by Rose Pressy Betancourt. This was another one out of my TBR jar. It was about Halloween, who is this witch who inherits her great aunt's manor. She opens a bed and breakfast, and two intriguing men turn up to stay at this bed and breakfast. It's a love triangle sort of thing. It's got that urban fantasy vibe as well. So obviously they're not human and they're not what they seem. There are 15 of these books and I enjoyed it, but not enough to continue. It's definitely not my vibe anymore, but teenage me probably would have loved them. Then, so back in early 2023, I made this decision to buy this box of books randomly off Facebook Marketplace. They worked out to be like $2 each. And one of those books was a Alex Cross book by James Patterson. It was book 5. So I read it and in the hopes that potentially, you know, I could just get a bit of an idea as to whether it's a series I would have liked to, start from the beginning. And look, they're readable. There is a reason why there are so many James Patterson books, okay? I get it. They are okay. However, I'm not a huge fan of James Patterson. The more I've looked into him, there are a lot of things about him that I don't agree with. So purely from that sort of perspective, I don't have any intention to continue this series. I did sort of look at synopsises of the book series because there are so many books in this series. And the way that it went, it didn't vibe with me, but it was a good read. They do hook you in, they get you into the story, and it was a quick read. So I understand the hype. I understand why a lot of people like James Patterson, but yeah, just personally from the perspective of, the fact that he promotes things that I don't agree with, and the fact that he, puts his name on so many other people's works. And I'm sure that, they all get paid substantially and they're all happy in that situation. But I just feel that that is not something that I can agree with personally. So yeah, I just don't have any intention of continuing this series. This year, there are a couple of books that I have read that I have no intention of continuing the series. And the first one is Call Me By Your Name by Andre Asserman. I read this after watching the movie purely because I saw on TikTok one of Timothée Chalamet's scenes from this movie and I was like, I have to watch this. His acting is impeccable. And the story, I found it really confusing watching it in the movie at the start. So I picked up the book in the hopes that maybe I would understand it a bit better. And I really did. I don't condone the premise of the book. I am not okay with a 24-year-old pursuing an affair with their lecturer's son who is underage. I definitely don't promote that or condone that myself. However, I did enjoy the book and I found that the writing was beautiful. But then I discovered that there was a second book and I was hoping that we would get a bit more of a story between Elio and Oliver. But apparently they're only in about 11 pages of this book. And the second book is actually about Elio's father having an affair with a much younger woman, which just doesn't interest me. So I don't have any intention of reading that one. But I do think that I'm glad that I read Call Me By Your Name. And despite the fact that there are problematic actors in the movie, I really loved Timothée Chalamet's acting in that role. I found it gave me a whole new appreciation for him as an actor. So don't intend on continuing, but really enjoyed the first book. Then I picked up another reader on haul, and that is the Dragonlance series by Meg Jensen. I have spoken about this recently, I believe, because I was on YouTube by this point. But the first book was okay. I don't plan on continuing. It's a YA fantasy series about this small town that's surrounded by fog, and anyone that heads into the fog never returns. So Tressa, she loses her grandmother and decides to leave the town, venture out into the fog, and try to reverse this curse and remove the magic surrounding the town. But what is outside the fog actually endangers everything, and it kind of went in a direction I really didn't expect. But it was okay. Yeah, it was okay. I finished it. I didn't DNF it, but I don't plan on continuing the series. After that, I read Red Rising, which is book 1 of the Red Rising saga by Pierce Brown. I did listen to this on audio, and I don't know if maybe that just wasn't the right modality for me to ingest this book, because I've heard a lot of people love it. They compare it to like a sci-fi Hunger Games And I love The Hunger Games. I want to reread that very soon because it's been so long and it was one of my favorites. But yeah, I don't know. This just didn't vibe with me. It didn't hook me in. So I don't have any intention of continuing, but I understand why people like it and enjoy it. And I just personally think that there are other sci-fi that, I'd rather invest my time in. But yeah, it was all right. It was an all right read. I just couldn't keep up and I didn't really care. And then actually, this is a fairly recent read, so I don't plan on going into too much detail about this one, but this was an audio that I picked up. It is book 1 of the All Who Wander series by Emma Strike, called The Time Traveler's Daughter. It was enjoyable. I did enjoy the audio experience reading this book. Will I continue it? Don't know. I don't think so. It's time travel, historical fiction, romance. I like all those genres, and it was enjoyable enough, but I don't know that, I'll continue the series. There are 5 primary works in the series at the moment, and it is a small sort of indie author, so I do really promote, reading their work and not just reading the really, really popular books. But yeah, I don't know if I'll continue it, but I did enjoy it. I really, I enjoyed the end. I found the way that it all wrapped up was quite sweet and lovely. But yeah, not enough for me to continue. But that is it. That is the end of part 3. I've recorded this all in one day, so I am ready to stop talking. But let me know in the comments if there are any series that you have started but you have absolutely no intention of finishing. If you've read any of these series and they're worth continuing, let me know, because it might change my mind. I'm really bad at adding things to my TBR, and if you convince me that I'll enjoy it, I will re-add it. But at this point, these ones are just ones that I don't really have any inclination to finish. But if you have enjoyed them, let me know. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to chatting to you again very, very soon. Goodbye, my darlings.